Hey guys, tonight we're easing into a journey that moves slow enough to lull your brain into that warm, drifting off place. You're standing at the edge of the frontier, boots in the dirt, morning breath mixing with the smell of campfire smoke as the Oregon Trail stretches out in front of you like one long, dusty dare. The wagons around you creak in the pale sunrise, and a cough echoes somewhere in camp. The kind of cough that reminds you that, statistically, you probably won't survive this trip. Comforting, I know. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, tell me your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing the little constellation of night owls scattered around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake in the grey-blue dawn, tucked somewhere, inside a canvas-covered wagon that smells faintly of flour, dust, leather, and yesterday's beans. The floorboards underneath you are already vibrating with movement, someone shifting, someone packing, someone muttering about how the oxen look grumpier than usual, which is impressive since oxen always look like they woke up on the wrong side of a miserable life. You pull yourself upright, feeling that familiar crick in your neck from sleeping against a wagon wheel. This is the glamorous start of the Oregon Trail. Sore muscles, foggy eyes, and the realization that you did not, in fact, bring enough coffee. Outside, camp stirs like a slow creature shaking off sleep. Tin cups clink, a baby fusses. Someone tries to light a fire with damp tinder and mutters language that's not quite PG-13 but close enough for frontier standards. You step into the cool morning air, and the prairie stretches out in a soft, endless hush. It hits you how big everything is, how small you are. Historians still argue whether this sense of overwhelming scale helped keep people determined or just quietly terrified. A mainstream historical fact drifts into your mind. Roughly 400,000 people attempted this journey between the 1,840 seconds and the 1,860 seconds. That's a lot of footsteps, a lot of creaking wagons, and a lot of very questionable trail snacks. But standing here now, before the first real mile even begins, you feel like one tiny dot on a gigantic, moving map. Your wagon stands among dozens, maybe 100, depending on the size of your train. Each one is practically identical. A narrow wooden box, covered with canvas, so thin, it's one strong sneeze away from tearing. You were warned not to ride inside unless absolutely necessary. And now, you understand why. After a few days, the floor will feel like a hardwood massage device created by someone who despises backs. But for now, you're just waking up, stretching out the stiffness, and trying to remember where you put your shoes. A man from the neighboring wagon wishes you good morning, with the energy of someone who's already had 3 cups of coffee, even though coffee is rationed and tastes vaguely like disappointment. A few teenage boys chase a runaway chicken. Someone jokes that if anyone loses another animal before noon, they're all trading him for a mule. There's a light joke right there, though, on the Oregon Trail. Trading a person for a mule might actually improve the odds of survival. You hear the team captain call out orders soft but firm, the voice of someone who's already checked the horizon twice and muttered, "Storm's coming," even though the sky is clear. The plan is simple. Get moving before the sun heats up and turns the entire prairie into a baking tray. You grab a biscuit, dry enough to be used as a blunt weapon, and chew while gazing at the open land. Somewhere in your mind, the math of the trail unfolds. 2,000 miles, months of walking, and the constant, unspoken knowledge that every creek, hill, and decision can twist fate. As you eat, someone in camp shares a quirky little tidbit, the kind that sounds like a joke but isn't. Apparently, some travelers swear that rubbing bacon grease on chapped lips keeps them from cracking. You consider this, glance at your stale biscuit, and decide you're one unfortunate day away from trying it. People around you are already hitching their oxen teams. The oxen snort steam into the morning air. Big, slow, powerful animals that move with the energy of a tired grandparent, but can pull a wagon across a continent. You'll grow oddly fond of them later, that's the rumor anyway. Someone hollers that it's time to form the train. Wagons begin rolling into place, wheels crunching over grass that will soon become rutted and beaten into memory. You climb into your spot beside the wagon, set your hand on the wooden sideboard, and take your first steadying breath of the day. This is where the real journey starts, not with drama, not with fanfare, but with the patient shuffle of feet waking up to miles ahead. You glance over your shoulder one last time, as many pioneers did, at whatever home you left behind. Some left farms, some left cities, some left nothing but debt. Historians still argue whether people were more motivated by hope or desperation. But out here, those feelings blur together like dust in your eyelashes. The wagon train lurches forward. You take your first step beside it, boots pressing dew-soaked ground, heart ticking in quiet rhythm with the rumbling wheels. It's not fear, exactly. More like the gentle hum of uncertainty. The same kind that keeps a modern sleeper awake at 2 a.m., wondering whether they left the stove on. But as the sun rises higher, the chill melts off your skin, and the prairie begins to glow. A peaceful moment, stretched thin but steady, wraps around you. You fall into step with the creaking wagons, the muttering oxen, and the soft buzz of other travelers settling into their new lives in motion. And just like that, the Oregon Trail begins. You fall into the rhythm of the moving camp, but your mind drifts back to the brutal simplicity of packing the moment, when you discovered that your entire life had to fit inside a wooden box roughly the size of a modest walk-in closet, if the walk-in closet were violently vibrating every time the oxen sneezed. The wagon lumbers forward now, but earlier this morning you crouched beside it, elbows deep in sacks, crates, and the quiet panic that comes from realizing you own way too much stuff for someone about to cross a continent on foot. You remember sifting through the pile. Flour sacks, bacon slabs, extra shirts, your one decent pair of boots, a few pots, a rope you're irrationally attached to for reasons you can't explain, and that little tin mug that somehow already tastes like ashes and regret. The smell of leather, grease, and dusty cloth filled the air as you tried to decide what mattered. You had a list. Of course, everyone planning this journey had one. Guides insisted you bring at least 200 pounds of flour, 75 of bacon, 10 of coffee, and 25 of salt. A mainstream fact, so widely repeated that even people who never left the East quoted it like gospel. But the moment you tried to cram it all inside, the reality became embarrassingly clear. You're not packing a wagon. You're playing an early, physically exhausting prototype of Tetris. Every space matters. Every gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. Every luxury item becomes the villain. There's no room for sentimentality, and yet here you are, contemplating whether your grandmother's quilt is worth the overhead. Spoiler, it is. Emotional comfort is worth 5 pounds of flour. You run your fingers along the crates now, remembering how you debated bringing your heavy cast-iron Dutch oven. It seemed necessary, everyone said. Cast iron was the lifeline of frontier cooking. But cast iron also weighs roughly the same as a baby buffalo. You brought it anyway. A soft joke drifts through your head. You'll either thank yourself later, or curse yourself every mile until Oregon starts handing out back massages. Around you, other families went through the same choreography. One woman threw half her china plates into the grass after weighing them, grief and practicality blending on her face. A father insisted on bringing a chest of books that made the wagon groan, like it was filing a complaint with management. Someone else brought a piano, because the Oregon Trail was apparently the original season of hoarders, Frontier Edition. According to a quirky historical tidbit, newspapers later reported that the trail became littered with abandoned luxury items, including an entire iron stove, a keg of nails, and a full bathtub. You imagine the ghost of some poor pioneer staring at his cast-off, muttering, "Yeah, that bathtub was definitely a mistake." As you walk beside the wagon now, feet crunching through grass, you can feel every pound of your decisions. Wagons weren't meant for comfort, they were meant to survive. Too much weight breaks wheels, splinters, axles, and slows the team. And if your wagon breaks in the middle of nowhere, you're not phoning roadside assistance, you're sitting in the dirt hoping your neighbors like you enough to stop. Historians still argue whether most travelers packed too much because they were overly optimistic, or because they had no clue how physically draining the journey would be. Either way, by the second week of walking, almost everyone wished they'd halved their load. That's future you's problem. Present you is still trying to look confident as you shift your shoulders and say things like, "It'll all work out," while ignoring the wagon wheel making a concerning squeak. Someone calls from behind you, one of the older men who helped balance the weight earlier. He warns you again that storing heavy items too high will make the wagon tip. It's a valid concern, An unbalanced wagon on uneven terrain is basically a wooden tumbleweed waiting to happen. You nod, remembering how he smacked the canvas cover and announced, "Keep it low, keep it tight," which sounded less like packing advice and more like something a 19th century gym coach would yell. You glance at your food storage next. The sacks of flour sit like pale giants. Bacon, pickles, and dried beans make up the rest of your frontier culinary future. A child from a nearby wagon asks you what you're planning to cook on the trail. You answer honestly, soup. And probably more soup. Frontier cuisine was famously creative, in the sense that people creatively rebranded the same 4 ingredients over and over until morale collapsed. Still, there's a strange comfort in the predictability of it. Simple food, simple tools, simple expectations. The modern part of your brain whispers that you already miss seasoning, but the sleepy part of your brain just appreciates how repetitive frontier life is. Repetition is soothing. Repetition calms the mind. Repetition makes great bedtime content. That's a win for you, even if your future meals taste like disappointment with a hint of salt pork. As your wagon creaks along the trail, you look back at the place where you laid everything out this morning, remembering the final check. Bedding, rifle, spare wheel parts, needles, thread, rope, always rope, extra boots, dried apples, coffee beans, and the journal you swore you would write in every night, even though by night 3, you'll be too tired to spell your own name. A joke slips through your thoughts. Maybe you'll use it as fire kindling instead, which would be the most relatable diary arc in history. Packing wasn't just about things. It was about imagining months of weather, terrain, accidents and hunger, all squeezed into a cart with wooden wheels that hate you. But you did it. You tied down the canvas, cinched the ropes, checked the axles, and stepped back with the exhausted pride of someone who just completed a challenge that should have come with a badge. Now, as you walk with the wagon rolling steadily beside you, you feel the weight of your choices settle into place. Not heavy, not light, just real. The sun warms your shoulders. The prairie unfurls ahead. What you packed is what you carry. What you carry is what keeps you moving. And what keeps you moving is the quiet belief that somewhere far ahead, the Willamette Valley waits like a promise you can almost touch. The wagon rattles beside you like an oversized rattle designed by someone who dislikes silence. By now, you've walked long enough for the prairie dew to dry off your boots, leaving a faint crust of dust at the edges. These are your first real miles into the unknown, and they feel strangely calm, like the world has slowed into a soft, steady hum. The road ahead is nothing more than a pair of deep ruts cutting through grasslands, and yet you follow them as if they were carved instructions. Walk here until the continent runs out. The morning air is still cool, but the sun is beginning to warm the horizon. You're already sweating lightly, partly from the steady pace and partly from the growing realization that this is not a heroic expedition, it's months of walking. Walking until your legs forget what sitting feels like. Walking until your feet send angry handwritten letters to your brain. Historians still argue whether pioneers truly understood how much walking this trip required, or if everyone privately assumed they'd ride comfortably inside the wagon until Oregon. Spoiler: no one rides comfortably in a wagon. The inside is a wooden blender that's set to mild suffering. Still, your steps settle into rhythm. The oxen plod beside you, clomping forward with the unwavering dedication of creatures who have accepted their unfortunate job descriptions. Their pace sets yours. Slow, deliberate, stubborn. On a good day, a wagon train might travel 5 to 18 miles, but most days it's more like 10 miles. That's it. A mainstream historical fact that still feels unbelievable when modern people can drive that in 10 minutes with an iced coffee in hand. Nearby wagons creak louder as the train stretches into a long line. Children chatter. Someone begins singing. Someone else immediately shushes them because it's too early for enthusiasm. The trail smells like trampled grass, warm soil, and a faint hint of animals who missed their last bath by several lifetimes. But there's beauty in it, quiet, endless, horizon-wide beauty. The prairie rolls out like a sea of gold and green, and every step you take pushes deeper into a world that feels almost untouched. At one point, you hear a shout from the front. Nothing urgent, just someone warning about a dip in the trail. The wagon ahead of you bounces violently, giving the driver an expression that says, "I've made a terrible mistake," followed by a soft curse as he adjusts the reins. You laugh under your breath. Frontier slapstick is alive and well. You shift your pack on your shoulders, feeling the straps bite lightly into your shirt. The weight is manageable now, but give it a week, and it'll feel like you're carrying an ox on your spine. You pass that first mile marker in your mind, a tiny, invisible milestone that makes you realize how far there is to go. 2,000 miles. 2,000. Your modern brain tries to calculate how many steps that is, before giving up and deciding ignorance is better for morale. A quirky trail tidbit surfaces from the gossip you overheard last night. Some pioneers believed that if you didn't start singing by the 3rd mile of the morning, the oxen would lose their spirit for the day. You don't know whether that's true, but you hum a little tune anyway, just so nobody blames you later if the oxen decide to stage a slow-moving mutiny. The sun climbs higher, warming the back of your neck. Someone passes you a tin cup of water, warm water, because insulated bottles haven't been invented yet, but it hits your throat with the refreshing power of a garden hose on a hot afternoon. Water sources won't always be this reliable. You try not to think about that yet. As the train moves, you start noticing small details. The ruts carved deep into the earth from countless wagons before you, the skeleton of a broken cartwheel abandoned by some previous traveler, the faint remains of a campfire crumbling into grey powder. These subtle remnants whisper the reality of the trail. Every family that walked here left a trace, some tiny, some tragic. You imagine your own future contribution, probably an empty flour sack, a lost button, or your patience lying on the ground somewhere around mile 500. Around mid-morning, the trail curves gently. You see a figure in the distance, a lone traveler walking back toward the east. That's unusual. As you approach, he tips his hat with the quiet dignity of someone who has made a reverse Oregon decision. He says nothing, but his expression says everything. Probably something like, "Nope." You can't help but wonder what broke his spirit. A broken axle? Bad luck? Or maybe he just really missed indoor plumbing. Historians still argue whether the people who turned back regretted it or saved themselves years of hardship. You keep moving. Your legs warm up. Your shoulders settle. Your mind begins drifting into that strange meditative space that only long, repetitive travel can induce. The prairie breeze brushes against your face, soft and cool. Grass sways. Insects buzz lazily around your boots. Your wagon creaks behind you like an old man clearing his throat every 20 seconds. The first miles don't test your strength, they test your acceptance. Acceptance that this will be your life now. Walking, dust, sun, sleep, repeat. You're no longer in a town, a farmhouse, or a familiar world. You're in motion, part of a wagon train, part of an enormous human river flowing westward. And strangely, it feels peaceful. You're not sure if it's the steady rhythm, the open sky, or the way the land stretches so far that tomorrow feels small and quiet. But for the first time, you sense the trail settling into you, filling your lungs, softening your thoughts, slowing your pace to match its ancient, worn groove. You take another step, and another, and another. The Oregon Trail is officially beneath your feet. You spend the next hour walking beside the wagon, but your attention keeps drifting to the real engines of this journey, the oxen. If you imagined this adventure would feel heroic, the oxen waste no time correcting you. They walk with the unimpressed resignation of creatures who've spent their entire existence hearing humans say things like, "Just a little farther." Their thick necks strain against wooden yokes, their hooves press deep into the soft ground, and their tails flick lazily at flies, as if swatting away your optimistic dreams. These animals are the heart of your progress. Horses, too fragile. Mules, too temperamental. But oxen? Oxen are the tanks of the 19th century, slow, unstoppable, and permanently judging you. A mainstream historical fact drifts through your memory. Nearly every successful wagon train depended on oxen, and pioneers considered them worth more than gold, coffee, or even a full night of sleep. You watch yours lumber forward, their breath puffing, in warm clouds. You're already grateful for them. You're already intimidated by them. And, in a funny way, you're already a little emotionally attached. You walk closer, keeping pace with the near-side steer. He glances at you with the same energy as a co-worker forced into a mandatory meeting. You can practically hear him think, "You signed up for this. I didn't." A light trail joke slips into your thoughts. On the Oregon Trail, the oxen do the hauling, but the humans do the complaining. Both jobs are essential. The drover, the person guiding the team, nudges the oxen with a soft cluck of his tongue. He carries a long stick called a goad, but you quickly learn it's more for direction than punishment. Oxen don't respond well to yelling or force. They respond to patience, repetition, calm commands. As you watch the drover walk, gently tapping the ground beside a hoof, you realize something surprising. This is a partnership. A slow, stubborn, mutually exhausting partnership. Someone once told you that oxen can recognize their driver's voice and even sense their mood. A quirky little tidbit claims that some oxen refuse to move if their owner was in a foul mood, almost like they were staging a passive-aggressive protest. You eye your team carefully. You make a mental note to stay cheerful, or at least fake it around them. The road dips slightly, and the wagon tips to the right with a groaning protest. One ox pulls harder than the other, and the wagon briefly drifts sideways before the drover corrects them with a quiet haw. You watch closely. Haw means turn left, G means turn right. Two simple words that guide thousands of pounds of wood, supplies, and your fragile optimism. Historians still argue whether oxen were chosen mainly for their strength, or because pioneers valued their steady personalities. Either way, watching them now, you understand. Horses would have panicked by this point. Oxen, they just keep plodding, like the universe owes them money, and they intend to collect. You reach out and touch the wooden side of the wagon. The vibration travels up your fingers, a steady rhythm carried straight from the oxen's shoulders to the wheel hub. This is how movement feels out here, slow, uneven, bone massaging. A reminder that nothing on this trail comes quickly. Behind you, someone's oxen decide they've worked enough for one morning and stop dead in their tracks. The driver tries coaxing, then pleading, then bribing with a handful of prairie grass, which the ox considers thoughtfully before continuing to stand perfectly still like a furry boulder. The nearby walkers chuckle softly. Stubborn oxen are practically a trail rite of passage. Eventually, with a sigh that seems too expressive for an animal, the steer finally moves again. You can't help but smile. Out here, your fate literally depends on the moods of animals who think dust baths are a hobby. The sun climbs higher, warming the backs of the oxen, and casting long shadows ahead of you. Their bodies sway with each massive step, muscles shifting under thick hide. Watching them becomes strangely soothing. Their pace becomes your metronome. Their stubborn persistence becomes its own kind of comfort, like a reminder that the world doesn't need to rush. You walk closer, listening to the soft grunt of their breath, the steady thump of hooves, and the occasional irritated snort at a fly. The leather yokes creak, the wagon groans. Somewhere behind you, someone sings a simple tune to keep spirits up, and you notice the oxen perk slightly, almost as though they approve. They say the trail changes a person. You didn't expect it to begin with learning the personalities of livestock, but here you are. One ox seems friendly, one seems grumpy, one looks like he's planning to file a complaint with management. You'll learn their quirks, their strengths, their breaking points. You'll come to rely on them in a way that you feel strangely intimate. An alliance built on dirt, sweat, and the shared determination to put one hoof or one foot in front of the other. You glance toward the horizon. The prairie stretches out, shimmering with heat. The trail bends slightly west. The oxen press forward, steady as the sunrise itself, and you continue beside them, part of their rhythm now, folded into the slow heartbeat of the wagon train. Out here, oxen set the tempo of your life, and you follow, step after heavy, deliberate step. Evening creeps in slowly, stretching shadows across the prairie until the wagons settle into a loose circle that looks more accidental than strategic. The oxen snort and stomp the ground, grateful to be unyoked at last. You're grateful too. Your legs feel like soft noodles, and your back feels like it's been personally insulted by the frontier. But camp chores don't wait for anyone's sore muscles. If you thought the end of the walking day meant rest, the Oregon Trail immediately bursts that bubble like a soap film in a windstorm. The moment the wagon stops, everyone scatters into motion. Someone gathers brushwood, Someone else checks the wheels for cracks. A dog starts barking at an invisible threat. And you? You're handed the cooking pot because you made the terrible mistake of looking available. You set it near the fire pit, just a shallow circle scraped into the dirt, and begin sorting through the evening rations. Beans. Bacon. More beans. A sprinkle of flour. A faint memory of seasoning that has long since abandoned you. Frontier cuisine doesn't aim for excitement. It aims for survival. One mainstream historical fact floats through your mind. Camp chores consumed more time than the actual walking, and families often spent 2 to 4 hours each evening cooking, repairing, cleaning, and preparing for the next day. You feel that truth in your bones as you bend to gather kindling. The smallest tasks, tying down a rope, patching a rip in, your canvas cover, checking your water barrel, suddenly feel monumental when your body only wants sleep. A woman from a nearby wagon hands you a handful of dried onions. You're ecstatic. She looks at your excitement and laughs, saying, "Onions are worth more than gossip out here." And gossip is extremely valuable. People trade it as eagerly as they trade bullets or coffee. One quirky tidbit you overhear tonight claims that someone down the trail swears they saw a prairie ghost, which, based on the description, was almost certainly a mule in bad lighting. But you smile anyway. This is how trail rumors are born. Dinner simmers in the pot, bubbling with a thick, fragrant heaviness that promises nourishment and mild regret. The smell draws people closer, the way campfire smoke always seems to pull strangers into one shared bubble. You stir the pot slowly, feeling the heat kiss your face. It's comforting in the same way. A warm blanket is comforting, even if the blanket is woven from tiredness and desperation. Around you, the campsite glows with lantern light. Children chase each other, kicking up dust. Men sit on crates, arguing over which route to take tomorrow. Someone stretches their sore feet, muttering curses that somehow remain PG-13. You hear a mother soothing a crying baby while simultaneously fixing a torn wagon canvas with the efficiency of a frontier superhero. Historians still argue whether camp life helped strengthen community bonds or just exposed everyone's flaws. You suspect it's both. People are tired, hungry, and constantly worried about the next river crossing. But they're also generous, thoughtful, and quick to help when someone drops a pot lid or struggles to lift a heavy crate. Out here, cooperation is not optional. It's survival. You ladle the bean and bacon creation into wooden bowls, handing them out like a benevolent soup deity. People thank you sincerely. You take your own portion and sit on a flat rock near the wagon. The first bite tastes exactly like beans, and exactly like every meal you will eat for the rest of eternity. But warm food hits differently after a day like this. It settles your stomach and softens your thoughts. A light joke slips into your mind. You're starting to understand why so many pioneer journals include entire paragraphs dedicated to gratitude for bacon. As you eat, the prairie night deepens. The temperature drops sharply, a reminder that there is no wall, no roof, no insulation between you and the vastness of this place. You glance up. The stars spill across the sky in a glittering sweep so dense it almost looks painted. In towns, you never saw this many. Out here, the night sky feels alive, breathing quiet light into the camp below. You finish your food and rinse your bowl with a splash of precious water. Someone strikes up a soft tune on a fiddle, a slow, lilting melody that drifts through the cool air like a lullaby. A few people hum along, a few sway gently. The oxen lie nearby, their massive bodies rising and falling in slow breaths that almost sync with the music. You sit back against the wagon wheel, letting the sound wash over you. The wheel is hard. Of course, nothing out here is gentle on your spine, but the music makes up for it. For a moment, you let your eyes close, not to sleep, but to absorb the feeling of a long day settling into peace. Then comes the part you've been avoiding. Setting up your bedding, if you can call it that. It's a thin pile of blankets and one lumpy pillow you regret already. You lay it inside the wagon, where it's slightly warmer and marginally cleaner than the ground. Some people choose to sleep outside under the stars. You envy them. But you also remember that dew makes the morning feel like you slept inside a wet sock. You climb into your little nest of blankets and settle in. Outside, the crackling fire dims. Voices quiet. The last sparks drift into the air. You hear a coyote in the distance, a soft, eerie yip that ripples through the dark. It's not frightening. It's just part of the soundscape now. The wagon creaks as it cools. The night wraps around you, cold at the edges but peaceful. You breathe in the scent of dust and canvas. Tomorrow will be another 10 miles. Another day of walking, sweating, cooking, fixing, and trying desperately not to lose anything important. But for now, you let your body rest. And for the first time on this journey, the trail feels like home. Morning arrives not with a gentle whisper, but with the unmistakable sound of someone outside your wagon yelling, "Up! We've got ruts ahead." A beautifully poetic start to your day. You rub your eyes, stretch your shoulders, and immediately feel yesterday's steps humming through your legs like ghost aches. The wagon wheel beside your head seems to emit its own complaint, wood popping softly as the cool night air warms. You crawl out from under the canvas and step into a world made of pale gold. Dawn spills across the prairie, brushing everything with soft light. But even from here, before you've eaten or fully woken, you can see them. The ruts. Deep, carved, relentless. They cut through the ground like scars from every wagon that passed before you. And today, you're joining them. You kick at the dirt. It's dry already. That's a sign of the day to come. You grab a small breakfast, more hard biscuit, because fate clearly thinks you need dental challenges, and start walking beside the wagon. The ruts begin almost immediately. Some are shallow and gentle, others are so deep they could swallow a small child. The ground trembles each time a wagon wheel slams into one of the deeper grooves. A mainstream historical fact rolls through your mind. Some sections of the Oregon Trail developed ruts so deep that in places they were measured at 2 to 6 feet deep, carved by decades of migration. That's not just wear and tear, that's traffic trauma. You step over one massive rut and glance back at the wagon rocking violently as the wheel drops inside it. Everyone behind you winces in perfect emotional harmony. You walk ahead, spotting the next uneven dip and calling out warnings. This becomes the routine. Step, look, warn, repeat. The ruts stretch out like a crude roller coaster designed by someone who hates fun. By mid-morning, you're sweating. The sun climbs higher. Your shirt sticks to your back. You brush dust off your face and immediately feel new dust settle there, nature's SPF 0. The ruts are getting worse. They fracture and split, some veering left, others right, the way wagon teams get indecisive during dry seasons. A quirky little tidbit from camp gossip resurfaces. Apparently, some pioneers purposely steered their wagons outside the main ruts to avoid being locked in them like rails. But this often backfired, because the earth outside the ruts could be soft and deceptively deep, nature's version of a passive-aggressive trapdoor. Ahead of you, a wagon stuck in a rut rocks so violently that a crate tumbles off the back. It hits the ground with a soft thud, and a man groans out, "Not again," in a tone that suggests this is not his first crate loss rodeo. You jog forward to help, because that's what you do on the trail. Everyone helps everyone. It's either that or watch your neighbor lose half their flour supply to gravity and prairie physics. The man thanks you and jokes that if a wagon didn't shake at least one thing loose per day, it probably wasn't a real wagon. You laugh, even though your spine disagrees. Someone else mutters loudly that he'd pay real money for shock absorbers, then realizes he has no real money and drops the idea. The heat rises, the ruts deepen, your boots kick up dust with each step. The oxen grunt heavily, straining against the uneven pull as the wheels scrape one rut, then another. Historians still argue whether the worst ruts formed from overuse, seasonal erosion, or simply poor trail planning. But as you watch a wagon struggle to escape a particularly nasty groove, you decide the answer is probably yes. At one point, you notice something odd, a piece of metal glinting in one of the deeper ruts. You kneel down and pull it from the earth, an old horseshoe, bent, rusted, abandoned by someone long before you. It's a small reminder that countless feet, hooves, and wheels have crossed here. You brush the dirt off and tuck it into your pocket, not for luck necessarily, but as a comforting fragment of shared struggle. The day drags on, and the ruts begin to feel alive. They guide you whether you want them to or not. You can try walking beside them, but the uneven ground outside is its own unpredictable beast, so you follow them riding their highs and lows, feeling each sharp tilt through the wagon frame. Around noon, the ruts merge into a single deep channel. The wagon wheels slide into it like a train, locking into a track. The oxen groan. You brace. your hand against the sideboard just in time as the wagon tilts forward. Someone hollers, "Hold on," which is always helpful advice that comes exactly 1 second too late. The wagon lurches violently, then rights itself. You exhale through your teeth. Yesterday, you were just tired. Today, you're a human shock absorber. A light joke flickers through your mind. The Oregon Trail didn't need amusement parks, because the ruts alone provided all the thrills, terror, and lower back injuries anyone could want. By mid-afternoon, you spot a slight rise ahead. A hill. A blessed change in scenery. The ruts become shallow again, worn thin by wind and time. As the train climbs the hill, the prairie spreads beneath you like a soft, endless quilt. Golden grasses ripple in the breeze, clouds drift lazily overhead. The world feels wide, open, peaceful even with the groaning wagon behind you. You reach the top. A gentle wind cools your neck. The ruts dip down the far side, carving a soft curve into the land. For a moment, you understand why people made this journey, why they endured the ruts, the dust, the tired bones. There's something addictive about the trail, strangely soothing, quietly powerful. Even the hardships feel like part of a bigger rhythm you're settling into. The wagons keep rolling, the oxen keep plodding, the ruts keep guiding your path. And step by step, mile by mile, you settle deeper into the heart of the Oregon Trail. By the time the heat softens into early afternoon warmth, someone calls out the words every traveler dreads and desperately hopes for at the same time: water ahead. You perk up immediately, not because you're thirsty, you are, but because water on the Oregon Trail is never just water. It's a test, a gamble, a dramatic plot twist disguised as a muddy inconvenience. Rivers can be salvation, or they can be a slow-motion catastrophe with a current. You walk faster, the wagon creaking behind you, until the landscape dips and reveals a wide, sluggish stretch of brownish river winding through the prairie. It's not beautiful. It's not poetic. It's muddy. And yet, you've never been happier to see something that looks like chocolate milk mixed with regret. The wagon train pulls to a halt. People crowd along the bank. You crouch near the edge and let your fingers sink into the water. It's cool, cooler than the air, cooler than your expectations, cooler than the mood of someone who just realized their socks are about to get wet. A mainstream historical fact nudges your thoughts. River crossings were one of the most dangerous parts of the Oregon Trail, responsible for countless drowned travelers, lost wagons, and floating crates of bacon that future pioneers swore were omens. Someone beside you mutters, "Could be deeper than it looks." And that sentence alone is enough to make several people suck in their breath. Because on this journey, water lies. It looks shallow. It's probably a hidden canyon. It looks calm. It's absolutely planning to yank a wagon downstream. It looks safe. That's the biggest warning sign of all. The wagon masters gather, knee-deep in discussion and literal water debating where to cross. Historians still argue whether pioneers chose crossing spots based on skill, instinct, or whoever yelled the loudest. Today, it seems to be the third one. A tall man insists the narrow section is safest. A woman points out the visible whirlpools near the narrow part. An old-timer sighs and suggests crossing slightly upstream, where the current splits around a sandbar. You wait quietly. The oxen wait quietly. The river, however, seems to gurgle with mischief. A quirky tidbit floats into your brain. Some pioneers believed that tossing a handful of tobacco into the water would appease the river spirits. You're not particularly superstitious, but considering how many rivers ate wagons, you briefly entertain the idea of throwing in your terrible biscuit as a peace offering. Once a crossing point is chosen, the real work begins. Shoes come off. Pants get rolled up. Oxen are coaxed forward with bribery-level enthusiasm. The wagon train lines up like students waiting for a traumatic swimming lesson. Your turn comes faster than expected. You grip the wagon's sideboard as the oxen step into the water. The first few feet are fine, muddy, yes, but manageable. Then the riverbed drops suddenly, and icy water creeps up your legs. Your breath catches. Someone behind you yells, "Easy! Keep 'em steady!" The oxen snort and push forward, their legs churning through the murky flow. The water rises. The wagon tilts. Your heartbeat thumps in your ears. And for one tense moment, The river's pull tugs just enough to make you panic. You dig your heels into the mud, leaning hard against the wagon to keep it from drifting. A wheel catches on a submerged rock. The wagon jolts. Your stomach drops. You hear someone gasp behind you, a child maybe, watching with wide eyes. But the oxen, bless their stubborn souls, keep pushing. Their massive bodies slice through the current with the determination of beasts who refuse to drown before dinner. Slowly, painfully, slowly, you make progress. Then, as if the river suddenly loses interest in ruining your life, the bottom rises again. The water lowers. The current weakens. The oxen grunt as their hooves find firmer ground. Your boots sink into wet sand as you step out on the far bank. You're soaked to the knees, cold and a little shaky, but you made it. Several wagons behind you cheer when they see yours emerge intact. A light trail joke floats into your mind. Congratulations, you just survived the Oregon Trail's version of a trust fall with nature. You take a moment to wring out your socks. The sun warms your skin, steam rising from your clothes in thin threads. People smile at each other, relieved. Some hug. Some collapse theatrically onto the ground. One man stands in the water, still gripping his hat, staring at the river like he's reconsidering all his life choices. The crossing continues for the next hour. Some wagons scrape bottom. Some almost tip. One loses a small barrel that floats away like a tiny pioneer with big dreams. By the end, everyone is exhausted in that uniquely satisfying way that comes after surviving something unnecessarily stressful. As the camp regroups on higher ground, someone cracks a joke about needing a lifeguard. Someone else checks their cargo to make sure nothing floated away. Oxen shake off the river with full-body shudders that splatter everyone nearby. You laugh, because it feels good to laugh after nearly becoming river decoration. Later, when you sit on a dry patch of grass eating a piece of cold bacon, you realize something. Water crossings mark the real difference between beginners and trail-seasoned travelers. Before today, you walked the Oregon Trail. After today, you've wrestled with it. The trail hasn't defeated you. Not yet. And as you lie back, letting the warm breeze sweep across your face, the muddy river babbles behind you, sounding almost friendly now that it's not trying to drown your wagon. You smile. One river down. Many, many more to go. Storms announce themselves on the prairie long before they hit you. You can feel them first, low pressure tugging at your skin. Wind shifting direction with a sly kind of decisiveness. Oxen lifting their heads, as if listening to something only animals can hear. By late afternoon, the sky behind you has turned a deep, moody blue-grey, the kind that makes every pioneer suddenly walk a little faster. Storms out here aren't background noise. They're events. They're characters. They're unwelcome house guests who show up early and eat all the bacon. You glance back from the trail ridge and see it. A wall of clouds building on the horizon, climbing on top of itself like a dark mountain range rolling through the sky. A shiver crawls down your spine. Thunder rumbles far away, low, long, and heavy. Someone in the train mutters, "That one's coming fast." Another person says something less PG-13 but equally accurate. Lightning flickers at the cloud's base. That's when the wagon master yells the phrase everyone was hoping not to hear. "Pick up the pace." And so you do. You and dozens of others increase your stride to a brisk, determined march. The oxen grunt, sensing urgency. The wagons rattle harder. A baby begins to cry, probably because the atmosphere has shifted from dusty afternoon stroll to nature's dramatic monologue. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Prairie storms could develop violently in minutes, bringing hail big enough to dent metal, winds strong enough to flip wagons, and rain heavy enough to turn the ground into a boot-stealing swamp. Diaries from travelers describe storms so loud that people couldn't hear each other shouting right beside them. You're about to find out whether those writers were exaggerating or underselling it. The wind hits first sharp, cold, and insistent. It pushes against your chest like a stubborn sibling. Dust swirls up around your ankles. The prairie grass ripples in long, frantic waves. You throw your weight forward, gripping the wagon sideboard for balance. The oxen snort and continue, but even their pace stutters under the sudden gusts. Thunder cracks. Not a distant rumble this time, but a whip crack of sound that vibrates through your ribs. You jump. Everyone jumps. Even the oxen look offended. Someone yells, Cover the supplies. People rush to secure loose items. Jackets, pots, small crates, the inevitable runaway hat. The sky darkens quickly now, swallowing sunlight in great mouthfuls until the prairie looks like it's being slowly dimmed by a cosmic hand. Then the temperature drops. Not politely, not gradually, instantly. The air goes from sweaty and warm to sharply cool, like someone opened a giant freezer door in the heavens. A quirky frontier tidbit you once heard surfaces. Pioneers used to say, "If the prairie goes cold in a breath, hold your hat and pray." You laugh nervously. The prairie has officially inhaled ice. The first drops hit huge, cold splats against your arms and face. Then more. Then many more. In seconds you're soaked, hair plastered against your forehead, shirt sticking to your back. Mud forms instantly beneath your boots. You slip once, catch yourself, and keep moving. Lightning forks across the sky with a blinding white flash, illuminating the entire landscape for a heartbeat. You see everything in that instant. The line of wagons stretching across the ridge, the oxen lowered against the wind, the faces of travelers set with determination and fear. Then the world plunges back into near darkness. Rain thickens, falling sideways in sheets. You can barely see. Your hat is useless. Your coat is useless. You wish your optimism came with a hood. Thunder booms again, shaking the ground. The wagon master yells, "Huddle in! Keep the wagons tight!" But his voice is nearly lost in the roar. You press forward, boots sinking into the slick earth. Water splashes up your legs. Mud grabs at your heels. The prairie has turned into soup, and you're walking straight through it. The oxen struggle. One nearly slips. You and the drover press your shoulders into the wagon to help keep it straight. Another flash. Time of lightning streaks above. Thunder answers instantly. You flinch so hard you nearly fall, and a half-joking thought crosses your mind. The Oregon Trail didn't need horror movies. The weather provided enough jump scares. The storm intensifies. Hail begins to fall hard. Round stones that smack your arms, your shoulders, your hat, your pride. You yelp. Everyone yelps. The oxen grunt angrily as hailstones bounce off their thick hides, like small, rude greetings from the sky. Historians still argue whether hailstorms were feared more than river crossings, but standing here, being pelted by ice while trying not to drown on dry land, you feel inclined to vote yes. At last, someone shouts, "Stop! Stop here! Circle if you can." The wagons grind to a halt on a slight rise. People rush around them, forming as much of a protective shape as possible. It's not a perfect circle, more like a lopsided, panicked clump, but enough to offer a little shelter. You scramble beneath your wagon, pulling yourself into the shadow of the wooden frame. Rain hammers the canvas above you like a drum played by someone who skipped anger management. The ground is cold, muddy, but relatively still. You breathe hard. You listen. And slowly, the storm's fury begins to lessen. Lightning becomes less frequent. Thunder rolls instead of cracks. The rain softens from a roar to a persistent hiss. The hail stops. The worst is over. You crawl out from under the wagon, dripping and sore. The air smells fresh, now wet grass, clean earth, and wood soaked through. The prairie glistens like it's been polished. But the camp looks like a disaster. Wagons lean at odd angles. Clothing hangs from wheels. People wring out their sleeves and blankets. A man shakes his fist at the sky, like he's filing a weather complaint. Then comes the joke, moment you didn't expect. Someone holds up a hailstone and shouts, "Free ice for the root cellar." Laughter ripples through the group. Weary, but genuine. Storm survival humor is a special flavor of relief. You take stock of yourself. Bruised shoulder, wet boots, mud everywhere, but alive. Everyone you see is alive. The oxen shake themselves off like oversized dogs. The children jump in puddles. People rebuild what needs fixing. And you realize something important. Storms like this change you. Not dramatically, not loudly, but quietly. They show you how thin the line is between calm and chaos, how fragile a wagon is, how stubbornly human your spirit becomes when the sky tries to flatten you. As the storm clouds drift east and sunlight slowly returns, you step back onto the soggy ground and breathe in deeply. Another trial passed, another prairie mood swing survived, and the Oregon Trail rolls onward. The morning after the storm arrives heavy and hesitant. like the prairie itself is still recovering. The ground squishes beneath your boots, waterlogged and sticky, and each step makes a quiet schlorp sound that's both embarrassing and weirdly satisfying. But there's no time to enjoy the post-storm mud spa. Today introduces you to three of the Oregon Trail's ceaseless companions: dust, heat, and sickness. The holy trinity of, why did I sign up for this? Your clothes are mostly dry, but your bones feel damp. The air is thick with humidity from last night's downpour, but that won't last long. No matter how wet the prairie starts, by midday it will transform into a cracked frying pan under a sky that has no mercy. You trudge alongside your wagon, shaking the stiffness from your legs and trying not to think about the blister on your heel, which now feels roughly the size of a walnut. A faint breeze rolls through the grass. For a brief moment, you think, maybe today won't be so bad. Then the heat arrives, not gradually, not politely. It slams down on you like someone opened a giant oven door. You stop mid-step, squint upward, and let out a soft sigh that translates roughly to, "Of course." The oxen grunt in agreement. Within an hour, any remaining moisture on the ground or on your clothes evaporates, leaving everything dry, crackled, and annoyingly dusty. Dust becomes your new main character. It puffs around your ankles. It billows with each wheel turn. It sticks to your teeth. It settles on your eyelashes so thickly that blinking feels like dusting furniture. You lick your lips and immediately regret it. The taste is what you imagine a ground-up chalkboard would be. A mainstream historical fact reminds you that trail dust was so constant and so thick that many travelers tied bandanas around their faces, making everyone look like exhausted, sunburned bandits with questionable fashion sense. Some journals describe visibility dropping to just a few feet, especially when traveling behind a large wagon train. You tie a cloth over your mouth too, though it does little besides give you a new appreciation for fresh air. Your oxen seem particularly cranky today, snorting clouds of dust each time they lower their heads. One shakes his ears violently, then gives you a look that can only be interpreted as, "This is your fault." But the dust isn't the worst part. Not today. Someone behind you coughs a wet, rattling sound that cuts through the monotonous crunch of steps like a warning bell. Another person sneezes. You glance over your shoulder and see a woman leaning against her wagon wheel, pale and sweating. A man tries to fan her with his hat. Her lips look dry, too dry. Trail sickness has entered the chat. You've heard whispers about it for days. Everyone has. Diarrhea, cholera, dysentery. Fevers that come and go like prairie storms. Some illnesses strike quickly. Others simmer for days before turning vicious. A quirky tidbit from a seasoned traveler echoes in your mind. If you drink from a river with dead animals upstream, the river wins. Dark humor, but not wrong. Water quality becomes your obsession. You guard your barrel like it's filled with gold. You watch the oxen carefully. If animals refuse water, that's a sign. If the water smells off, that's a sign. If someone dips a dirty cup into the communal bucket, that's a sign you need to practice deep breathing to avoid yelling. Historians still argue whether disease spread more from contaminated water, poor hygiene, or simple proximity inside wagon camps. But the consensus is always the same. Sickness was the Oregon Trail's silent predator, and it was relentless. The coughing traveler is helped back into her wagon, but you know what that means. Wagons become quarantine zones. People whisper. They worry. They ration water. No one wants to be the one who gets sick. And no one wants to be the wagon that needs to stop for too long. The heat climbs higher, pounding your shoulders, making your head throb. Sweat soaks through your shirt, then evaporates, then comes back, then leaves again. Your body feels like it's trying to steam clean itself. You trudge on. Someone in the train jokes, "At least we're getting a free exfoliation treatment." It earns a few tired laughs. Humor becomes a survival tactic, one of the few that doesn't weigh anything. Your feet drag, your throat tightens, your water tastes like warm disappointment. The oxen slow to a stubborn crawl. Every gust of wind kicks a new sheet of dust into your face. You choke, wipe your eyes, and keep going because stopping feels impossible. The ground is hot enough to bake flatbread. The wagon wheels glow with heat. Even your thoughts feel sunburned. Then, around mid-afternoon, the dust gives you a moment of levity. You sneeze. Not a gentle sneeze. A violent, full-body sneeze. that launches a tiny dust cloud from your face like you're performing frontier magic. Several people laugh. You bow dramatically, as though you intended the whole thing. Somewhere nearby, a man says, "Bless you," followed by, "Careful, that's how storms start." You grin through your dusty misery. But the heat doesn't ease. By late afternoon, you're walking on autopilot, brain softened by sun. You can barely hear the wagon behind you. Everything sounds muffled, like the world wrapped itself in cotton. The dust hangs low, turning the air reddish gold. The whole prairie looks like an old photograph, with the contrast turned way up. Eventually, mercifully, someone calls, "Break, break for water." Your legs nearly fold with relief. You stop beside a shady cottonwood tree, shade meaning slightly less hot filtered sunlight, and drink from your flask. It's warm, metallic, and delicious, only because your throat is begging. You splash some on your face. It evaporates immediately. Impressive. You breathe deeply. Your pulse slows. The world unblurs. You survive the hottest part of the day. Dust, heat, and sickness. They're the quiet enemies of this journey. They creep, they linger, they wear you down grain by grain, hour by hour. But the fact that you're still standing, still walking, still breathing dust that could easily qualify as seasoning, it means something. You wipe your eyes, spit grit from your mouth, and tighten your grip on your wagon, because the trail isn't done with you yet. But you're not done with it either. By the time the sun leans westward, baking the prairie into a shimmering mirage, the atmosphere in the wagon train shifts. People perk up a little. Someone hums. A child skips instead of dragging their feet. The oxen look exactly the same, but that's normal, they were born unimpressed. The reason for this subtle rise in morale becomes clear once the wagon master turns and shouts the magic words, "Trading post ahead." Instant mood boost. Even if supplies are overpriced, stale, or slightly suspicious. A trading post means variety, new objects, new faces, new stories. After days of nothing but grass, dust, and the same 20 people you've already begun categorizing like a frontier personality chart, the idea of a place sounds glorious. You crest a low hill and see it. A cluster of rough log buildings, a few wobbly corrals, maybe a fence that looks like it had a fight with last winter and lost. It's not pretty. But out here, beauty standards are low. The little settlement stands like a beacon of commerce, hospitality, and mild disappointment. You smell it before you hear it. Smoke from a chimney, grease from a cook fire, leather, horse sweat. Warm bread, okay. You wish it smelled like warm bread. It mostly smells like people who haven't bathed in days, spending money they don't have. But your imagination is kinder than reality. The wagons line up loosely. The drovers lead the oxen to a trough. You stretch your back, brush off 3 layers of dust, and head toward the trading post with the same energy as someone entering a mall on Black Friday. A mainstream historical fact pops into your head. Frontier trading posts were notorious for wildly inconsistent prices, depending on supply, weather, season, and how desperate you looked while shopping. And today, you definitely look desperate enough to drive prices up. Inside the trading post, a dim, cramped cabin, you immediately spot shelves stocked with the strangest assortment of items. Tin cups, coarse flour, heavy rope, broken tools someone is optimistically trying to sell, questionable pickles floating in cloudy brine, a huge stack of boots in identical prairie brown, a jar labeled worm medicine of Romaine. Probably works. The proprietor, a wiry man with a beard that might contain its own ecosystem, nods at you. "Need anything?" he asks, which is frontier code for, "Everything here costs too much, but you'll pay anyway." You pick up a tiny tin of coffee. The price makes you exhale sharply through your teeth. You consider haggling, but remember a quirky tidbit someone told you yesterday. Traders often doubled prices right after storms, because wet travelers were less inclined to argue. You are extremely wet, and extremely not in the mood for negotiation. Someone beside you asks the price of a new wagon wheel. The trader answers, "Your soul and $5. The man stands there, thinking seriously about whether that's worth it. You wander the cabin, touching items you can't afford, pretending to consider ones you definitely don't need. A child begs his mother for a candy twist. The mother looks at the price and says, "Maybe in Oregon." A few travelers sit at a crude table sipping watery coffee, savoring every drop like it's liquid heaven. Then you hear something interesting. Gossip. True frontier currency. A woman whispers that another wagon train passed through 2 days ago and warned of a river farther west running dangerously low, just a line of stagnant puddles. Someone else claims to have overheard that a buffalo herd was sighted not far from here. A third person swears that a wagon broke an axle yesterday because the wood came from a cursed tree. You lean in subtly. Who needs entertainment when you have rumors? Historians still argue how accurate these frontier news chains were. Some believe gossip was the trail's lifeline. Others think it was 70% exaggeration, 20% superstition, and 10% someone mishearing something over the sound of oxen. But every word affects your travel decisions. Information, even questionable information, keeps you alive. You pick up a spool of thread, useful, lightweight, and reasonably priced. The trader rings it up, pushing a few rusty nails toward you as free extras. You thank him, even though the nails are bent beyond all hope. Outside, the trading post yard buzzes with activity. Someone trades a rifle for 2 sacks of flour. Someone else swaps a broken frying pan for a half-used bottle of medicine. A man tries to sell a gently used saddle that looks like it was mauled by wolves. The oxen, finished drinking, stand nearby, flicking their tails and judging everyone. You hear laughter behind you and turn. A group of women are gathered around a woman wearing a bright blue ribbon, an actual ribbon, shiny and elegant, utterly unnecessary on this trail, and therefore a treasure. She beams as they admire it. Someone jokes that she'll still be wearing it in Oregon, even if she has to sew it onto her hat to keep track of it. As the sun slips lower, casting long gold shadows, families begin repacking their wagons. The trading post visit is over almost as quickly as it began. Supplies are heavier, purses are lighter, spirits are slightly lifted. You sip from your newly purchased tin cup of lukewarm coffee, which tastes like hope and mild disappointment. You climb back into position beside your wagon and take one last look at the humble cluster of buildings. The trading post stands there, sturdy and small, weathering time and dust with the tenacity of a frontier mule. And then you walk away. The prairie swallows the settlement behind you. The land stretches wide again, quiet and endless. You think of the overpriced flour, the questionable pickles, the worm medicine you refuse to believe works, and you smile. The Oregon Trail has very few stops, so when it offers you one, you take it, even if it costs 3 times more than it should. The land begins to change as you push farther west, not suddenly, not dramatically, but in slow, almost imperceptible shifts, like the prairie is gradually revealing new layers of itself. You notice it first in the grass. It grows taller here, softer, brushing against your shins as you walk. Then you notice the openness. An openness so wide it feels like standing in the middle of the sky instead of under it. This is the Great Plains, and stepping into them is like stepping into another world. Your wagon train stretches out in a long line behind you, a rattling spine against an endless horizon. The oxen plod steadily, leaving a faint path through the grasses. Their pace is as predictable as ever. Slow, stubborn, and immune to any sense of urgency. You've grown used to it. In some ways, you've surrendered to it. Out here, the world moves at oxen speed. The morning begins cool, breezy, almost gentle. You take a deep breath of the crisp air and feel something you haven't felt since starting this journey. Space inside your lungs. The trails smell the dust, sweat, bacon, and mild despair is still there, but diluted now by wind sweeping across thousands of unbroken miles. A mainstream historical fact floats up in your thoughts. The Great Plains once held some of the richest grasslands on Earth, with ecosystems so vast and interconnected that early travelers described them as oceans of grass. Standing here, you can understand why the metaphor stuck. When the wind moves, the entire landscape ripples like waves. It's beautiful, it's haunting, and it's brutally empty. You walk beside your wagon, eyes drifting across the horizon. You don't see trees, you don't see hills, you don't even see other wagon trains. Just grass, endless grass. At first, it's peaceful. Then, after a few miles, it becomes unsettling. The world feels too wide, too exposed. You suddenly understand why some pioneers wrote about the plains with awe, and others with dread. Historians still argue whether the psychological toll of the Great Plains was underestimated. Some settlers described feeling numbed by distance. Others spoke of loneliness so thick it felt like a weight on their shoulders. You feel a little of that now, not sadness, exactly, but awareness. The land doesn't hide anything. There's nowhere to disappear, nowhere to rest your mind except the repetition of walking. But repetition can be soothing. You settle into the rhythm, step after step, crunch of grass, sway of wagon, soft grunts of the oxen, occasional chatter from families walking nearby. The world becomes a lullaby of motion and quiet. A quirky tidbit drifts through your memory. Some pioneers swore that talking to the landscape kept them sane. They'd greet the morning like an old friend, whisper complaints at the horizon, or tell stories to the wind. You try it once, just a small, well, here we go again, and the wind steals it immediately. Maybe that's the point. By midday, the sun climbs higher. The breeze thins. The Great Plains show their harsher side. The air grows warm, then hot, then uncomfortably hot. The grass bakes. The earth dries. Your boots feel heavier, and your clothes cling to your skin. You stop to drink a small ration of water, aware that the next reliable source could be miles ahead. The wagon master calls for a brief break under a rare, lonely cluster of cottonwoods. You collapse into the shade with the others. Some people lie flat on the ground, hats over their faces. Children chase grasshoppers. Someone tries to nap, fails, and mutters about missing their feather bed back home. You lean back against your wagon wheel, which at this point has become your unofficial therapist, and close your eyes. The breeze returns faintly, brushing your face. You listen to the small sounds around you. Insects buzzing, oxen breathing, someone quietly tuning a fiddle. Even in exhaustion, these sounds feel grounding. But rest doesn't last long. Soon you're back on your feet, pressing deeper into the plains. The afternoon light sharpens, shadows grow thin, the air thickens with heat. You begin to understand why so many travelers feared this stretch, not because of danger, but because of scale. Mile after mile begins to blur. The trail feels endless. The sky looks too big to hold on to. Dust builds again. Your throat tightens. Your boots kick up tiny sandstorms with every step. At one point, the wind dies completely, and the silence becomes so full it almost hums. Then suddenly movement. Far ahead, on the horizon, something shifts like a shadow rolling across the ground. At first you think it's clouds. Then you realize clouds don't move sideways at ground level. It's a herd, a huge one. Even from this distance you can see the ripple of broad backs, the shimmering shapes moving as one. Buffalo. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. A living tide of fur and muscle, and ancient instinct. Your breath catches. Someone whistles low. Someone else murmurs. Never seen so many. The oxen stop in their tracks and stare, ears forward. Even the children fall silent. The herd moves slowly, steadily, dust rising around them like smoke. You hear faint rumbles, hoofbeats, lowing calls, the deep, resonant pulse of life on the plains. It sends a small tremor through the ground, through your boots, through your chest. You're witnessing something older than any road, older than any nation. Great migrations crossing the prairie, long before humans carved a trail through it. Historians still argue whether buffalo herds truly stretched as far as the eye could see, or whether that was poetic exaggeration. But standing here now, watching the distant wave of animals roll by, you feel inclined to believe the journals. The Great Plains belong to them. You watch until the herd fades into heat haze. Only then do you start walking again. As the sun dips lower, the heat loosens its grip. The wind returns. The sky shifts to warm orange. After a day of unbroken plains, the colors of sunset feel like a gift. You breathe in slowly. Your feet ache. Your shoulders burn. But your spirit feels strangely settled, like this endless land has smoothed out all the sharp edges inside you. The trail ahead glows softly in the fading light. Your wagon creaks behind you, and the Great Plains stretch on, vast and quiet, welcoming you deeper into their horizon. The plains widen around you as the wagon train pushes forward, and the land begins to feel alive in ways you didn't expect. Not lively, but aware, watchful. You start to notice signs you missed before: tracks in the dirt, flattened grass, distant movement that your mind mislabels as wind until it shifts in the wrong direction. This is the section of the Oregon Trail where wildlife becomes unavoidable, sometimes wondrous, sometimes nerve-wracking, and sometimes just plain strange. It begins quietly. You walk beside your wagon, half asleep in the warm breeze, and spot something dark pressed into the earth. You crouch, brushing aside a few blades of grass. A hoofprint deep, split, perfectly shaped, bigger than a cow's, much bigger. You whistle softly. Buffalo. And not just one. The ground holds dozens of impressions, layered over each other, like overlapping stories. The tracks head northwest. Your wagon master steps beside you, squints, and murmurs, "Big herd." He says it with the reverence of someone talking about a thunderstorm, or a mountain, vast, powerful, slightly terrifying. A mainstream historical fact flickers through your tired mind. Some buffalo herds on the plains were so massive that they stretched for miles, sometimes taking hours to fully pass a single point on the horizon. Travelers wrote of the ground trembling beneath their feet, of dust clouds rising like smoke signals. You're about to find out whether those accounts were dramatic embellishments or just the plain truth. A distant rumble reaches your ears. You freeze, instinctively. It's low, rhythmic, not thunder, not wind. Hooves, many hooves. Within minutes, the horizon itself shifts. Dark speckles appear first, then swell into shapes broad-shouldered, woolly, lumbering shapes moving as one. A herd of buffalo, maybe hundreds strong, rolls across the plain like a slow tide. The earth vibrates beneath your boots. Every ox in the train lifts its head simultaneously, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. You stand still, breath caught in your throat, and watch. The herd isn't close enough to threaten, but it's close enough that you feel the power of it. Close enough that the sound sinks into your ribs. The buffalo move with a strange combination of weight and grace, massive bodies gliding through the grass as if the land itself guides them. A child whispers, "They look like clouds." You agree. Brown, shaggy, muscular clouds. Someone in the train starts counting under their breath. Someone else mutters, "No point, there's too many." The drover beside you makes a soft clicking noise with his tongue, soothing the oxen, who seem torn between awe and deep existential panic. Historians still argue whether buffalo truly paid attention to wagon trains, or simply treated them like mildly annoying obstacles. Watching them now, you suspect the latter. The herd doesn't acknowledge you. It simply moves, inevitable, unstoppable, older than any trail you're walking. When they finally fade into the haze, the air feels strangely empty, as if something ancient has passed through and taken a small piece of the world with it. You begin walking again, but now your eyes scan the landscape differently. You notice movements you missed before: jackrabbits darting in zigzags, prairie dogs poking their heads from burrows, hawks circling above with lazy authority. Insects hum and buzz. The whole plain vibrates with quiet life. Then you see something that makes you pause. Bones. A long, sun-bleached ribcage lying half buried in the grass. Maybe a buffalo, maybe an ox from a previous train. You toe the bone gently. It shifts in the dirt, fragile as chalk. Someone behind you murmurs, "Circle of life, huh?" You nod, but it's also a reminder of how unforgiving this land can be. A quirky tidbit you remember from last night's campfire comes to mind. Some pioneers believed that finding animal bones scattered along the trail was a sign of good hunting luck. Others thought it meant hardship ahead. You're not sure what you believe, but you step around the bones respectfully, just in case. The wagon train continues, weaving around prairie dog holes like a slow-moving obstacle course. The oxen grunt, annoyed each time their hooves sink slightly into soft ground. A man ahead yelps as he nearly twists his ankle, stepping into a hidden burrow. Frontier life, where the deadliest trap might be dug by a rodent. A while later, a shout rings out from the front. Snake. That single word is powerful. Half the train freezes. The other half rushes forward for a better look, because curiosity is stronger than self-preservation. You walk up cautiously, peering into the grass. A long, mottled snake lies coiled near the wheel ruts. Not a rattler, thankfully, but still large enough to ruin someone's day. The drover grabs a long stick, nudges it gently. The snake uncoils lazily, clearly irritated that its sunbath has been interrupted, and slithers away with the offended grace of someone who's just been asked to leave a restaurant. You exhale. Nature is beautiful. Nature is horrifying. Nature is unpredictably both. As the afternoon wears on, shadows stretch long across the prairie. The heat eases. Birds call out across the open land. You even spot a fox slipping between tall grasses, its orange coat glowing in the late light. It pauses, stares at you for 3 seconds, then disappears like a whisper. That brief encounter fills you with a quiet kind of joy. Not excitement, just a soft, grounding moment that reminds you you're not alone out here. The plains may be vast and empty, but they're also full of movement, breath, instinct, and small stories playing out in the grass. Historians still argue whether wildlife sightings comforted or frightened travelers. The truth is probably both. But for you, right now, the rhythm of the land feels almost soothing. As the sky blurs into pink and gold, you settle into your steps. The wagon creaks behind you. The oxen snort gently. A bird skims low across the trail, wings catching the fading light. For the first time in days, you feel a kind of calm. A wild calm. A prairie calm. A reminder that even out here, especially out here, life flourishes in quiet ways. All around you, the land begins to rise beneath your feet, not sharply, not suddenly, but with a slow, steady insistence that makes your calves whisper complaints by mid-morning. You barely notice the incline at first. The prairie still rolls gently, but something in the air shifts. The breeze grows cooler. The grass thins in patches. The horizon develops subtle wrinkles. You're climbing. This is the part of the trail where the continent begins to tilt upward, nudging you closer to the spine of North America, the high country, the place where the Oregon Trail starts flexing its elevation. You feel it long before you see anything dramatic. The oxen feel it too. Their pace becomes slower, more deliberate. Their breathing deepens. They grunt more often, like they're filing a complaint with management. You pat their sides as you walk, murmuring encouragement even though they mostly ignore you. Still, you swear their ears tilt your way sometimes as if they're listening, even if they'd never, to admit it. A mainstream historical fact rustles in your mind. The approach to the Rockies wasn't a sudden wall of mountains, but a long, gradual rise stretching across hundreds of miles. Travelers often wrote that the climb felt endless, like walking up a tilted table that kept tilting more each day. You're beginning to understand why. By mid-morning, the wind shifts again. Cooler. Sharper. You welcome it after days of heat, but the chill carries a strange message. The land is changing beneath you. Slowly, but surely. The soil turns rockier. The grass is thin. The earth takes on a new palette: greys, tans, muted greens. The sky feels higher somehow, like the air has been stretched. Ahead, the wagon train creaks and groans. The sound is different now, echoing faintly, as though the ground is absorbing less and reflecting more. You adjust your stride, planting your feet carefully on the uneven terrain. Someone behind you says, "Feels like we're walking uphill both ways." Someone else replies, "That's just how the trail works." A few chuckles lighten the atmosphere. As the incline steepens, you hear a sudden crack. Everyone freezes. Then, a sigh of relief, just a tree limb snapping under the weight of a bird. But every unexpected noise out here teaches you the same lesson. The farther west you go, the thinner your margin for error becomes. You climb another rise and pause to catch your breath. The view behind you takes your breath in a different way. The Great Plains stretch out in a shimmering sweep, gold, green, endless. For a moment, nostalgia brushes you. You were just there, and now you're climbing towards something new. A quirky tidbit someone mentioned around last night's fire slips back into memory. Pioneers used to say that once you spotted a mountain that looks like a sleeping giant, you'd know you were getting close. You scan the horizon out of curiosity, half expecting a giant stone nose or forehead, but all you see are distant knuckles of land rising gently. Maybe the giant is shy today. The afternoon sun comes down hotter than expected, baking the rocky soil and reflecting heat back up at you like a sneaky second sun. Your boots slip once or twice, and each time you catch yourself with an awkward flail that you pretend no one saw. The oxen, naturally, maintain perfect balance, reminding you that they are simply built different. The air grows thinner as you climb. It's not dramatic yet, but noticeable enough. You pause to catch your breath more often. Even conversations become shorter, reduced to grunts, sighs, and the occasional, "How much farther?" Historians still argue whether pioneers were adequately warned about the slow rise in elevation. Some journals suggest people found it harder than expected. Others claim the climb barely registered until the first big ridge appeared. You fall somewhere in between. It's not impossible, but it's definitely not gentle. By late afternoon, the landscape shifts again. You spot your first real boulder. Not just a rock, a boulder. A big one. It sits beside the trail like an ancient sentinel, covered in lichen, shaped by centuries of wind. Some of the younger travelers immediately climb onto it, triumphant, until their parents tell them to get down before they break something. You touch the stone briefly, cool, unyielding, a hint of the mountains that lie ahead. The breeze picks up, colder now. It carries scents you haven't smelled in weeks: pine, sagebrush, something crisp and mineral-rich. The high country has scents the prairie never did. You breathe deeply, letting the new air settle in your chest. Then you notice something else, the sound of running water. Not a river, not a muddy crossing, a genuine mountain stream. Clear enough that you can hear the sparkle in it. When the wagon train reaches it, people rush forward eagerly. You cup your hands and drink. It's cold, shockingly cold. It wakes every nerve in your Stockton face. You laugh between gulps. Someone jokes, "That's the first water on this trip that didn't taste like old leather." They're not wrong. You refill your canteen. Your oxen drink greedily. The train lingers a moment, savoring the rare treat of clean, flowing water. As you press onward, the land begins to undulate more dramatically. Hills, rises, wind-carved ridges. The wagon train snakes through them, wheels crunching over gravel, oxen bracing with each incline. The afternoon light softens. Shadows grow longer. The air cools quickly, making you grateful for your jacket. The sky shifts from pale blue to deep azure. Night comes faster in higher places. As the sun dips behind a low ridge, you catch your first hint of a true silhouette. Far off, faint, barely visible. A mountain, grey-blue in the haze, huge, ancient, close enough to recognize, but far enough that you feel small in a way you never have before. You stop walking. Your breath catches, and something inside you whispers quietly, "This is real. You're really doing this." You stand on the edge of high country, the gateway to the Rockies, and tomorrow you'll climb even higher. Morning comes with a crisp bite to the air, a reminder that you've officially entered the part of the journey where the land stops being polite and starts being honest. The faint silhouette you glimpsed yesterday now rises more clearly as you walk, the first real approach to the Rocky Mountains. Not the gentle rolling hills that lulled you into a false sense of security. Actual mountains, ridges, peaks, jagged lines clawing at the sky. Even from a distance, you feel them in your knees. The wagon train slows slightly as the incline grows steeper. The oxen grunt, breath steaming, their muscles straining in ways you haven't seen since the start of the trail. The drover pats their sides, murmuring encouragement. You do the same, even though you mostly get a look that says, "This is definitely your fault, the fur." Mountains loom larger with each mile, and the trail begins shifting from gentle rises to slopes that make your calves ache instantly. You adjust your footing, leaning forward as you step, gripping the wagon's sideboard for balance. The ground here is uneven, rocky, cracked in places, gouged by earlier wagons that carved rough pathways through the rising terrain. Loose stones clatter beneath your boots. A mainstream historical fact echoes in your mind. The Oregon Trail crossed the Rockies not through dramatic snow-packed walls, but through long, grueling mountain passes that tested the strength of wagons and people alike. South Pass, one of the most famous, was wide and relatively gentle but still punishing after weeks of climbing. You're not at South Pass yet, but you can feel the trail preparing you for it with each step upward. As the wagon train inches higher, you begin to see why the passes were so feared. The land tightens, the wind strengthens, the air thins. The horizon folds into ridges and valleys that seem to pull you into a maze made of stone. Around mid-morning, the trail curves sharply around a rocky outcrop. The wagon ahead of you tilts dangerously, one wheel lifting a few inches off the ground. The driver freezes. Everyone around him freezes. Even the oxen stop moving, almost as if they've collectively decided today is not the day to tip a 2,000-pound wooden box off a mountain. The wheel drops back down with a heavy thunk. A shaky breath echoes through the group. You step in to help guide the wagon through the narrow pinch of rock. The oxen pull hard, their hooves slipping on gravel before finding purchase. The whole wagon groans like it's reconsidering its existence. You make it through. But the message is clear. The mountain passes are not gentle, and they do not care about your feelings. Your turn comes. You grip the wagon, plant your feet, and breathe deeply. The narrow bend feels like the mountain is testing your balance, your patience, and your ability to not scream in front of strangers. You coax the oxen through with soft words, careful steps, and a prayer that you hope the rocks find flattering. You clear the bend. You exhale. Someone behind you mutters, "If it keeps getting steeper, we'll need wings." Someone else replies, "Great. Another thing we forgot to pack." A small wave of laughter follows. Humor becomes essential here. If you stop laughing, you'll start thinking. And thinking too much in the mountains is dangerous. By midday, the trail becomes even more rugged. Deep ruts vanish, replaced by raw earth and exposed stone. You notice wheel marks scratched into the rock scars, left by earlier travelers who dragged their wagons over the same brutal terrain. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some pioneers actually greased their wagon wheels with animal fat before climbing into passes, hoping to reduce friction. Others brought extra axles and spokes purely for this section, knowing full well that mountain passes ate wooden wheels like snacks. You're starting to understand why. Just an hour later, you hear the dreaded sound. Crack. Everyone freezes again. You turn slowly. It's the wagon behind you, its right front wheel leaning inward at an angle that screams, "Nope." The family gathers around it. The father kneels, inspecting the damage. The mother holds her breath. Children whisper. The oxen stand still, sides heaving. A broken wheel here, in this steep country, isn't just an inconvenience. It's a crisis. It can delay an entire train. It can force families to abandon supplies. In worst cases, it can end a journey. Historians still argue whether pioneers feared river crossings or mountain passes more. Standing here, watching that broken wheel, you cast your vote firmly in favor of passes. Fortunately, this family prepared well. They pull out a spare spoke, a small tool set, and a length of rope. People from nearby wagons gather to help. You hold the oxen steady, while someone lifts the wagon corner using a lever log. The repair is slow, tedious, nerve-wracking, but cooperative. And when that wheel finally settles back into place, everyone cheers softly. The mountains take things, but the trail community gives back. You walk on. The incline grows steeper still. Breathing becomes work. Your legs burn. Your shoulders ache. Even your thoughts feel heavier. But the view makes up for it. As the trail climbs, the land behind you expands into an ocean of earth. Rolling hills, long plains, fading horizons. Layers of color stacked like a painting. You stop once, just to take it in. A soft wind brushes your face. Cooler now. Cleaner. Carrying hints of pine resin even though you haven't seen a tree yet. The air tastes sharper. You breathe deeply, letting it fill your chest. Ahead, the first true slope of the pass rises a long, steady climb that looks endless. You plant your feet. You grip the wagon. And you begin. Step by step, breath by breath. The pass doesn't care about your fatigue, your sore feet, or your desire to lie down dramatically and declare yourself done. It simply rises. And you rise with it. By late afternoon, your legs tremble with each step. Sweat chills on your back. The oxen move slowly, heads low, muscles straining. You murmur encouragement to them, even though your own encouragement reserves ran out 2 hours ago. Just before sunset, you reach a small plateau, a flat, blessedly level space where the wagon master calls for camp. The relief is so intense you nearly drop to your knees. The ground here is hard, rocky, but it might as well be a featherbed after the climb. As the camp settles, Fires flicker against the rising mountain shadows. The air turns cold quickly, sharper than anything you've felt so far. You wrap yourself in a blanket and sit near the flames, letting their warmth seep into your tired bones. Above you, stars sprinkle across a deeper, darker sky. You're in the high country now. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, you face the heart of the mountains. The cold wakes you before the sun does. Not a gentle cold. This isn't the soft chill of prairie dawn, but a sharp, unfriendly mountain cold that seeps straight through your blanket, your clothes, and whatever optimism you had left. You inhale, and the air feels thinner, crisp enough to sting your lungs. When you exhale, your breath drifts like pale smoke. You're officially high enough now that mornings begin with frost and regret. You sit up slowly, your muscles protesting after yesterday's climb. The wagon wheel beside you pops faintly as it adjusts to the temperature shift. A thin layer of ice glitters on the canvas cover, turning it into something almost beautiful if you ignore the fact that you slept beneath it. You crawl out of the wagon and immediately pull your coat tighter. The whole campsite is freezing. People stomp their feet, someone coughs harshly, someone else mutters that if the mountains get any colder, they'll start charging admission. The oxen stand close together, steam rising from their backs like small, stubborn furnaces. Then you hear the three words that every traveler dreads. Food's running low. You've known it was coming. Everyone has. The long climb drained energy. The rough terrain slowed progress. Now cold weather creeps in, the kind that eats up calories faster than you can replenish them. You gather near the fire pit, where a small pot simmers with thin, sad soup, a handful of beans, a shred of bacon, a heroic amount of hope. A mainstream historical fact flickers in your memory. Food shortages were one of the biggest threats in the higher elevations, especially when wagon trains underestimated the time it would take to cross the mountain passes. Many journals describe reducing meals to half rations, then quarter rations. You're not quite there yet, but you're close enough to feel the tension humming in the air. You eat your small serving with slow, mindful bites. It's warm, at least. Warm counts for everything right now. The wagon master walks through camp, his face tight. He warns that snow may arrive sooner than expected. You glance at the sky blue for now. Deceptively serene, but the cold wind has a winter edge. Dry, sharp, whispering secrets of storms waiting just beyond the peaks. Historians still argue whether early-season snowstorms were exaggerated in diaries for dramatic flair. But as another icy gust cuts across your face, you decide the diaries were probably being modest. Once camp breaks, you begin climbing again. The pass ahead isn't steep, but it stretches on forever long, sloping and relentlessly upward. Your breath comes shorter. You feel the altitude in your chest, like the air itself is rationed. Even the oxen struggle. Their steps slow, their heads droop, their breath forms thick clouds as they strain up the incline. You pat one on its flank, whispering encouragement. He responds with a grunt that translates roughly to, "You first." By mid-morning, the wind picks up. Cold, fierce, biting. Dust is gone now, thankfully, but in its place are swirling flurries of grit and frost. You shield your face with your sleeve. The wagon canvas slaps violently in the wind. A barrel rope snaps somewhere behind you, sending everyone scrambling to secure their gear before it tumbles off the ridge. You're exhausted and freezing, but you keep moving. The alternative is worse. As you climb, you hear a voice from the front of the train. Animal tracks. Curiosity and nerves push you forward. Near a patch of thin snow, you see them clearly, paw prints. Big ones, deep ones. The drover kneels beside them, frowns, and says, "Wolf." You swallow. A quirky frontier tidbit comes to mind. Travelers claimed wolves followed wagon trains not for people, but for scraps, bones, food rinds, the occasional abandoned item. Sometimes they trailed just out of sight for miles. Other times, they got bold. You glance over your shoulder periodically now, just in case. But the trail behind you stays empty, except for wind carving small shapes into the frost. The climb continues. You lose track of time. Your legs ache. Your fingers go numb even inside your gloves. The cold becomes a thought, a presence, something that presses into your bones and refuses to leave. Then finally, you reach a small crest. It isn't the top of the pass. Not yet. But the land levels out enough that everyone sighs in relief. People drop their packs. Someone collapses theatrically. Someone else laughs, delighted to have survived the morning without turning into a human icicle. But the relief fades quickly. Ahead, you see snow. Not deep, not everywhere, but patchy white drifts cling stubbornly to the rocky slope leading into the next ascent. The wagon master gathers everyone. "We push hard today," he says, voice steady. "If weather turns, we don't want to be stuck on the ridge." You nod, even though your legs scream in protest. Snow in the mountains is no joke. It hides rocks, it hides holes, it hides the trail itself. When snow falls here, the world becomes guesswork, and wagons don't do well with guesswork. The train pushes forward. The crunch of frost under your boots becomes steady. The cold intensifies. Each breath burns. Your lips crack. Your nose numbs. The oxen's hooves slip occasionally, sending jabs of panic through your gut, but they keep going slow, powerful, relentless. You imagine what this place must feel like in full winter. Walls of snow, bitter winds, ice everywhere. The idea alone makes you shiver deeper into your coat. Historians still argue whether pioneers dreaded mountain snow more than any other obstacle. But based on your current misery level, you're voting yes. Definitely yes. By late afternoon, the trail dips slightly into a sheltered hollow where the wind calms. Camp is set here smart, safe, tucked against a rocky ridge that breaks the cold. Fires spark to life. People warm their hands. Soup simmers again. Thin, but hot. You sit close to the flames, letting heat seep into your numb fingers. Your breath rises in front of you, curling like smoke. Tonight, the cold will bite hard. Tonight, food will be meager. Tonight, the mountains will whisper their warnings. But tonight, you're still here. Still climbing. Still moving toward Oregon, one frozen step at a time. You wake before dawn, long before the sun even considers showing its face. The cold is sharper today, an icier, more deliberate chill that sinks straight through your blanket and settles in your bones like a tenant who has no plans to leave. When you sit up, frost cracks off your sleeves. Your breath comes out in ghostly clouds. The canvas above your head is stiff with frozen dew, like someone dusted the wagon in powdered sugar only to make it taste cruel. Today is Snake River Day, one of the most dreaded crossings on the entire Oregon Trail. You haven't even stood up yet, and already feel the tension humming through camp like a live wire. People move quietly, bracing themselves for what's ahead. Someone sharpens tools. Someone checks the rope supply. Someone mutters a half prayer, half complaint that the river had better behave today. The oxen sense it too, heads low, breaths puffing steam, eyes darting more frequently. Animals always know when a day is important, or dangerous, or both. You sip a cup of coffee so weak it barely qualifies as flavored water. Warmth spreads through you anyway. You'll need it. The wagon train begins moving, just as the horizon brightens with a pale, icy light. The land slopes downward, the trail growing rockier, looser, and more treacherous. Frost clings to the weeds. Your boots crunch with each step as the soil transitions from hard mountain grit to softer, damp earth. Within an hour, you hear it. A roar. Low at first, then louder, then unmistakable. The river. Snake River isn't the biggest river on the trail, but it's unpredictable. Fast in places, deep in others. Shallow where you expect depth, and bottomless where you expect shallows. Its currents twist like they're alive. A mainstream historical fact rattles through your mind. Snake River was responsible for more drowned livestock and more lost cargo than almost any other crossing on the route. Diaries describe wagons tipping, oxen swept downstream, families watching, helplessly, as barrels and bedding disappeared into the current. Your stomach tightens. As you approach the bank, the full sight of it hits you hard. The river is wide, wider than you hoped, and loud white froth curling over submerged rocks, swirling pools where the water churns itself into eddies. The opposite bank looks impossibly far away, a strip of earth bathed in early sunlight. The wagon master stands at the edge, boots sinking into damp sand. He studies the water, silent. Everyone waits. Even the children are quiet. The wind is still. Historians still argue whether wagon masters chose crossing points based on experience, instinct, or pure luck. Watching yours now, jaw set, eyes narrowed, you decide it's probably a mixture of all three. Finally, he speaks. We cross upstream today, current slower, bottom looks firm. No one cheers, no one sighs in relief. Everyone just nods, because what choice do you have? You help unhitch the oxen from your wagon, guiding them toward the water. They step cautiously, snorting nervously. Their hooves sink into silty mud. One huffs loudly, as if to say, "You expect me to walk into that?" You whisper encouragement anyway, even though you secretly agree with him. Before the wagons enter, you strip down to roll up your pants and secure every loose item you can. Anything not tied down will be gone the moment the current grabs it. Someone double knots the ropes on your crates. Someone else checks the wheel spokes again. The entire process feels like preparing a ship for a storm. Then comes a quirky little tidbit that someone mutters behind you. They say if you talk kindly to the river before crossing, it'll let you pass. You stare at the water. You decide to stay silent. You don't trust a river that roars this loudly. Your turn comes faster than you'd like. You grip the wagon sideboard. The oxen lower their heads and step into the current. Water splashes around their knees, then their chests. Their bodies tense, muscles rippling beneath thick hide. The river pushes back with a strength that surprises you, like a living creature trying to shove you off course. The wagon follows. The wheels hit the water with a deep glug. Immediately, the current grabs the right side and pulls. Hard. You lean toward the opposite side to counterbalance, but the shifting weight nearly knocks you off your feet. The oxen strain. Their hooves slide across slick river stones. You feel your heart pound against your ribs. "Steady," someone shouts. "Left! Left!" another voice yells. The drover wades beside the team, boots braced, pulling on the reins with desperate precision. The oxen respond sluggishly, fighting not just the water, but their own fear. You can see it in their eyes. Wide, white-rimmed, terrified, but they pull anyway. They always do. The water rises, knee-deep, thigh-deep, up to your waist. Your breath catches. The cold is shocking, stabbing into your bones. You gasp, teeth clenching. The current tugs at your legs so aggressively that for one terrifying moment you think you'll lose your footing. You cling to the wagon, fingers numb, body shaking. This is the closest you've come to real danger yet. Not the dramatic, movie-style danger. The quiet kind. The slow, creeping, relentless kind that swallows people whole. A barrel shifts in the wagon bed. Then another. You push forward, praying the ropes hold. The oxen grunt loudly, muscles straining so hard their bodies vibrate through the water. One slips just for a heartbeat, but that's enough to send a jolt of fear through the entire line. You yell encouragement loud, desperate encouragement, and somehow it works. Or maybe the oxen simply trust the drover more than the river. Either way, they regain their footing and push forward with a surge of strength. The current eases. The water lowers around your legs. Your boots scrape gravel. Solid ground. You take one step, then another. Then the wagon's wheels rise from the riverbed with a sucking sound, water pouring off them in sheets. The oxen climb the opposite bank, exhausted. And you collapse onto the sand, chest heaving, soaked to the bone, hands trembling. But you made it. Your wagon made it. A few cheers rise from the group. Not joyful cheers, more like relieved, shaky laughter from people who know exactly how close that was. A man beside you shakes his head and mutters, "I swear, that river takes years off your life." You laugh weakly, because he's right. As more wagons cross, some struggle, some scrape rocks. One tips slightly before righting itself. But by late afternoon, everyone is safely across. Snake River lies behind you, now wide, roaring, hungry. You stand on the far bank, dripping wet, heart still pounding, and realize something. The river didn't take you, and that means the trail still wants you. Oregon still waits. And tomorrow, you keep walking. You wake the next morning with a heaviness that isn't entirely physical. It's more like the weight of the entire journey has quietly settled onto your shoulders overnight. Snake River is behind you, a victory, yes, but victories on the Oregon Trail don't feel triumphant. They feel like breathless pauses between new challenges. And today? Today you feel every mile in your bones. You stand, stretch, and immediately regret stretching. Your legs protest. Your back cracks. Your feet, well, your feet seem to have entered a long-term disagreement with the concept of walking. But walk you must. The wagon isn't going to push itself, and the oxen certainly aren't known for initiative. The morning air is cool, not mountain cold like before, but with a dryness that hints at long miles ahead. The sky is pale blue. The prairie, or what's left of it out here, stretches in muted colours, dusty yellows, faded greens, occasional patches of stubborn sagebrush clinging to life. This stretch, the final miles before Oregon, isn't dramatic. It's just long, relentlessly, stubbornly long. You begin moving with the train. Your boots scuff the dirt rhythmically. The wagon creaks behind you like an old friend complaining about life. The oxen grunt, shoulders rolling, hooves pressing into the earth, with the determination of creatures who have absolutely no idea how many miles remain. A mainstream historical fact crosses your mind. Many pioneers reported that the final weeks of the journey were the hardest, not because the terrain was the worst, but because exhaustion had become a constant companion. The novelty had worn off. The excitement had faded. What remained was grit, and sometimes a quiet, simmering impatience. You feel it now, an ache for arrival, for stillness, for anything that doesn't involve dust. But the trail is not finished with you. The morning miles pass in a kind of trance. Your senses narrow. Your thoughts drift. Everything becomes rhythm. Step, breath, crunch, creak, step, breath, crunch, creak. You drift alongside other travelers who look exactly how you feel, bleary-eyed, slumped shoulders, distant stares. No one talks much this morning. Words way too much. The landscape shifts slightly, rising and falling in small undulations. Not mountains, not hills, just the slow roll of land, stretching forever. You crest one ridge and see another, and another, and another. It feels like walking across the spine of a sleeping giant. A soft joke pops into your mind. If Oregon doesn't show up soon, I might start walking the other direction just for variety. You smile to yourself. Sometimes laughter is all that separates you from despair. Around midday, the sun grows harsher. Your throat goes dry. Your water tastes warm and metallic. Flies buzz around your face with irritating persistence. You swat at them half-heartedly. They return instantly. Frontier pests are built different. The heat settles into your skin. Sweat beads along your hairline. Your hat shades you, but barely. The oxen pant more heavily. Their pace slows. You pat the nearest one on the shoulder, whispering encouragement. He flicks an ear, unimpressed. As the heat rises, you feel a wave of dizziness. You stop briefly, leaning against the wagon, head bowed. The world spins slightly, but you breathe slowly once, twice, and it passes. Historians still argue whether travelers suffered more from physical exhaustion or mental exhaustion during the final stretch. Diaries suggest both. Some wrote about aching muscles. Others wrote about restless spirits and clouded minds. You're starting to understand the latter. Your thoughts feel fuzzy, scattered, drifting like dust in the wind. But then something pulls you back. A call from ahead. Creak. Fresh water. The change in mood is immediate. People perk up, shoulders straighten, feet move faster. You feel hope squeeze into the cracks of your fatigue. The creek appears like a miracle, clear water trickling over smooth stones, sparkling in the sunlight. You drop to your knees, dip your hands in, and splash your face. The cold shocks your senses back to life. You drink, slowly, savoring each swallow. The oxen drink too, tongues lapping eagerly. Children laugh as they wade in the shallow edges, sending ripples across the surface. For a few minutes, everyone is human again, not dust-covered walking ghosts. A quirky tidbit you dimly remember surfaces. Some pioneers believed that clear running water entered the bones and woke the spirit. Standing here now, dripping and refreshed, you're inclined to agree. The break lasts longer than usual. No one wants to leave the creek, but eventually, the wagon master calls out, "Time to move on." The groans are quiet but unanimous. Still, the next miles feel slightly lighter. Not physically, your legs still ache like they're auditioning for a tragedy, but mentally, your spirit feels less frayed. The afternoon stretches onward, shadows lengthen, heat fades. A faint breeze returns. You climb another gentle ridge and see more ridges, but they're smaller, softer. The horizon is changing shape. It's subtle but noticeable. Then you hear someone gasp, "Trees!" You squint hard. Yes. Far ahead on a distant slope, a scatter of dark shapes. Trees, real trees. After days of barren land, the sight is almost emotional. A woman near you wipes her eyes. A man whispers, "We're close. We have to be." Historians still argue whether trees truly signaled nearing Oregon or simply better soil. In any case, they signal something to you right now. Progress. You walk faster. The last miles of the day feel like a mental tug-of-war between hope and exhaustion. Your feet scream to stop. Your heart urges you forward. The trail dips, rises, winds gently around pockets of scrub and stone. By dusk, you make camp near a shallow basin. The sky glows pink and gold. The air cools quickly. People talk in low, content voices. The oxen rest, without complaint. It feels different tonight. Not joyful, not relaxed, but determined. You sit beside the fire and stare into the coals. Your body is beyond tired. Your mind is soft. But something warm stirs inside you. You're close. Not done. Not safe yet. But close. The final stretch is ahead. And tomorrow, you'll walk it step by stubborn step. Morning rises gently over the basin, softer than the days before. The air carries a faint sweetness, not from flowers. Those are rare out here. And not from anything you can name exactly. It's just different. Calmer, fuller, warmer in a way that sinks quietly into your chest. You stand, stretch, and realize you're doing it without immediately regretting your life choices. That alone feels suspiciously hopeful. Someone points toward the horizon and whispers, "Look." You follow their gaze. Trees. Not a distant mirage this time. Not a handful of scraggly branches clinging to life. Real trees, dark green, clustered, alive. They line a slope in uneven patches, spreading farther than your eyes can trace. The sight lights a tiny spark inside you. It's the first unmistakable sign that you're approaching the Willamette Valley, the promised land of every exhausted traveler moving west. The moment hits you hard. You've walked through prairie, dust, storms, hunger, mountains, and a river that probably shortened your lifespan. And now, trees. Real, honest trees. You feel emotions rising: relief, disbelief, and something quieter but deeper: belonging. The wagon train begins moving, and the mood is lighter than it has been in weeks. People smile more, talk more. Even the oxen seem to walk with a tiny hint of swagger, as if to say, "Finally, terrain we don't have to fight with every muscle." A mainstream historical fact floats through your thoughts. Pioneers often wrote that seeing the first true trees after months of plains and mountains felt like stepping into another world, like being welcomed home by a land they'd never seen. Standing here now, you understand those diary entries in your bones. You walk with renewed energy, but the trail still demands respect. The land becomes uneven, rolling out in complex folds, ridges, shallow valleys, pockets of shadow where the sun hasn't reached yet. The soil softens, richer than the cracked dirt you're used to. Sometimes your boots sink slightly. Other times, they step on springy forest debris, leaves, twigs, needles, shade. Actual shade. You stop beneath a tall pine and let the cool shadow wash over you. The scent is sharp and clean. Pine resin, damp bark, earth that's been alive for centuries. You inhale deeply, then again, savoring it like the world's simplest luxury. Someone near you whispers, "Smells like heaven." Someone else says, "Smells like home." Historians still argue whether the Willamette Valley's reputation was exaggerated by guidebooks or accurately portrayed by settlers desperate to recruit more neighbors. But walking into its outskirts now, you don't need pamphlets. The land speaks for itself. As the hours pass, the forest grows thicker in places. Not dense enough to block the trail, but enough to create a kind of map made from shadow and light. Sunbeams slip through the branches in golden ribbons. Birds call overhead actual melodies, not the sparse chirps of the plains. You tilt your head to listen, letting the sound settle into the tired cracks of your mind. A quirky tidbit pops up in your memory. Some pioneers claimed that the first time they heard birdsong again after months of harsh silence, they burst into tears. You used to think that was exaggeration. Now, you're one melodramatic note away from proving them right. The wagon train slows as it descends a gentle slope. The air grows warmer, richer. Moisture clings to your skin. The wind carries scents you've forgotten. Soil, leaves, maybe even distant water. You feel the land changing beneath your boots. Every step feels less like survival and more like welcome. Then you hear it. Running water. Not a river. Not a dangerous ford. A stream, gentle, steady, peaceful. You push ahead and find it glimmering through the trees. Clear water flowing over pebbles, bordered by ferns and moss. Children rush to splash in it. Adults kneel to drink. Even the oxen wade in up to their ankles, lowering their heads with contented snorts. You crouch beside the water, cup your hands, and drink. It's cold, crisp, and impossibly refreshing, not metallic, not muddy, not discouragingly warm. For the first time on this journey, water tastes like kindness. You sit back against a mossy stump and let yourself breathe. The Willamette Valley isn't here yet, not fully, but this is its doorway, its breath, its promise floating on the wind, and you feel something you haven't felt since the beginning of the trail. Ease. Not safety, not arrival, but a softness inside your muscles, a confidence in your stride, a sense that the hardest parts are behind you, not all of them, but enough. The wagon master walks past, eyes scanning the scenery with a rare smile. "We're real close now," he says quietly. "A few more days, maybe less." A murmur of relief spreads down the line. The word Oregon drifts on the breeze like a blessing. You rise and continue forward. The forest thickens, then thins, then thickens again. The land dips and rises in gentle contours. The trail becomes softer beneath your feet, cushioned by fallen needles and leaves. Sunlight glows warm through the canopy, casting golden patterns that move as the branches sway. And inside you, something begins to settle. Not the full weight of completion, not the triumph of arrival, but the quiet certainty that you're walking into a new world, one where survival might finally shift into living. You follow the wagon, the oxen, the trail, deeper into the softening land. Oregon is close. You can feel it in the trees, in the soil, in the sunlight, in your bones. And tomorrow, those instincts will lead you even closer. The morning light filters through the trees with a warmth you almost don't trust. After so many weeks of harsh sun, bitter cold, and unpredictable storms, this soft golden glow feels suspicious. You blink into it, letting it warm your cheeks, and stretch slowly. No sharp aches, no frostbite sensations, just the gentle soreness of a body that knows the journey is nearly over. You step out from the wagon and immediately notice it. The land feels different, not just in the scenery, but in your chest, in your shoulders, in the way your boots meet the soil. For the first time on the entire trail, you sense the faint hum of arrival, like your mind is already easing into a new rhythm before your body catches up. The wagon train stirs with the same quiet anticipation. People speak softly, but their voices carry a spark you haven't heard since independence. Children shuffle in excited circles. A few adults try not very successfully to hide their smiles. Even the oxen seem oddly cooperative this morning, as if they, too, are tired of endless trudging. The trail winds gently through groves of tall trees, their trunks wide and mossy, their branches stretching like welcoming arms. Ferns crowd the edges of the path. Sunlight dances across patches of undergrowth. Birds call from somewhere overhead, birds with voices far more musical than the sparse prairie chirps. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. Settlers described entering the Willamette Valley as stepping into a place so green and fertile that it felt blessed by God, or like a garden that never ends. You believe them. The air itself feels fuller here, milder, warmer, softer. It carries the scent of damp soil, decaying leaves, and distant flowers. Your boots sink slightly into the rich earth. Not mud, not dust. Something in between a live soil. Soil that holds promise. As you walk, memories of the journey flash through your mind in quick, blinking images. Storm winds ripping across the pot. Prairie rivers roaring with icy promise. Dust coating your teeth in gritty layers. Mountain passes where breath came short. Cold mornings that made your fingers go numb. Endless plains that stretched like a second sky. And now, this quiet, lush beauty. You feel a sting behind your eyes, unexpected, uninvited. You brush it away quickly. You blame the pollen. The morning grows warm as the trail slopes downward. The land ahead opens into broader meadows, scattered with wildflowers, yellows, whites, little purple clusters bowing gently in the breeze. A few deer graze at the edge of the clearing. They lift their heads as the wagon train approaches, blink lazily, then continue chewing. That's how you know the land is changing. Even the wildlife isn't scared of you anymore. A quirky tidbit you once heard drifts back. Some pioneers claimed that the deer in Oregon were so gentle they barely bothered to run unless you asked them to. Exaggeration? Maybe. But today, watching those calm creatures, you wonder. As the day warms, the wagon train pauses beside a wide clearing. It's not an official stop, just one of those places where the land itself asks you to take a breath. The grass is soft, nearly knee-high. A small stream cuts through the center, clear and bright. It's an easy place to linger. People sit in the grass, leaning back on their hands, faces turned toward the sun. Someone takes out a fiddle, of course they do, and plays a soft, drifting tune. Not lively, not sorrowful, just gentle, like the land itself is humming along. You sit too, letting your legs stretch out in front of you. Your body feels feather-light compared to the pain of previous weeks. You run your fingers through the grass. It feels different from prairie grass. Cooler, smoother, less brittle, healthier. You feel healthier. Someone near you murmurs, "I could stay here forever." Another replies, "Wait until you see the valley." Historians still argue whether pioneers romanticized Oregon out of exhaustion, but the truth is simpler. After thousands of miles of hardship, even normal nature feels miraculous. Eventually, the wagon master calls everyone back into motion. Reluctantly, you rise and follow. The trail bends again, weaving through thick groves of alder and birch. Sunlight flickers across your face in a pattern that feels almost playful. And then late afternoon you crest a small rise and freeze. Before you lies a broad slope of land that dips gently into a wide, fertile valley. The view hits you so hard, you forget to breathe. The earth below is green, real green, dazzling green, rolling out in rich, layered textures. Trees cluster in soft groves, fields open into broad meadows, and a distant river glitters like a silver ribbon winding between them. The sky above is clear in a way you haven't seen for months. This is it. This is the promise. This is Oregon. Your knees nearly buckle as a wave of emotion sweeps through you. Exhaustion. Relief. A feeling so big it fills your chest until you can't quite inhale all the way. You look around and see the same expression reflected on dozens of faces. The stunned, overwhelming realization that the nightmare is ending and the dream is beginning. Some people fall to their knees. Some laugh. Some cry. Some simply stare, unmoving. One man places his hand over his heart. A woman whispers, "We made it." A child shouts, "It's so green." You feel the land pulling you forward, not pushing you, not challenging you, not testing you, welcoming you. You start walking again, but the steps feel lighter, easier, almost floating. Your boots press into rich soil that smells like life. The oxen walk without hesitation. The wagon rolls smoothly. And for the first time since this journey began, your heart feels at home. The final morning dawns with a soft silver mist hanging low over the land, drifting lazily between patches of tall grass and the edges of groves that look almost storybook in the gentle light. You wake with a deep, slow breath, your lungs stretching more comfortably than they have in months. Your body still aches, of course, but it's a lighter ache now. One earned, one understood, one softened by the promise of what lies ahead. Camp is quieter today, not from fatigue, but from reverence. Everyone knows this is it. The last miles. The last footsteps before the journey becomes memory. You pack your few remaining supplies with slow care. The canvas feels lighter, the ropes less stubborn. Even the oxen seem calmer, as if they too sense an ending drawing near. One of them leans gently into your hand as you pat his flank, a rare moment of shared peace after hundreds of miles of mutual suffering. You smile. He snorts softly, a farewell in its own earthy language. A soft breeze floats through camp, carrying the scent of dew-soaked earth and pine needles. A child giggles somewhere nearby. Two women hum while repacking their things. Men check their wagons one last time, not out of worry, but habit. The wagon master stands a little straighter this morning, his face gentler than you've ever seen it. The train begins its slow roll forward, and the land, as if choreographed by time itself, opens before you. Fields stretch wide with rich earth, dark, fertile soil calling out with quiet invitation. Low hills roll gently like waves. The horizon lifts, warm and bright. Birds swoop overhead in playful arcs. Even the sunlight feels different here, softer, golden, generous. A mainstream historical fact surfaces in your mind. Pioneers often describe the moment they finally entered the Willamette Valley as a place where the land seemed to breathe with you. Standing here now, every breath you take feels deeper, easier, almost synchronized with the world around you. The trail curves, winding slowly downward. You follow it step by step, your boots sinking into soft earth that feels impossibly forgiving after months of dust and rock. Your legs relax into the terrain's rhythm. No more harsh climbs, no more jagged stones waiting for ankles. Just gentle, rolling ground guiding you home. As the sun climbs higher, its warmth spreads across your shoulders. You pause on a small ridge, the last high point before the final descent into the valley. And there it is, spread out in a breathtaking sweep, the place you've walked toward through every storm, every river, every long mile, the heart of the Willamette Valley. The land glows under the morning light, lush and alive in ways the prairie never dreamed of. Green fields stretch as far as the eye can see. Rivers wind lazily through them like shimmering, silver threads. Tall groves cluster around the water, their crowns moving gently with the wind. The distant haze hints at settlements, future towns, future homes, future stories waiting to be built. Your breath catches, and something inside you unclenches. Something that's been tight since the first mile of the trail. You stand there for a long moment, letting the reality sink in. You made it. Not quickly, not easily, not without being reshaped in ways you'll carry forever, but you made it. The others gather around. Some cry quietly, some laugh out loud. A few sink to their knees, overwhelmed. One man drops his hat, presses his palms into the rich soil, and lets out a trembling breath, half prayer, half surrender. A quirky tidbit someone once told you returns now. Pioneers used to say that if you tasted the Willamette soil, you could tell whether it was good farmland. You don't plan on eating dirt today, but you do kneel down and run your fingers through it. It's soft, moist, strong, alive. It tells you everything you need to know without a single word. The wagon master clears his throat. "Let's head down," he says quietly. "There's good ground ahead." You take the first step, then another, each one lighter than the last. The descent is gentle. Sunlight warms your back. Your wagon creaks behind you, but even the sound feels softer, less burdened. The oxen walk with steadiness, heads level, as though they too are walking into their own kind of peace. As the valley floor rises up to meet you, the trail widens and softens. Grass brushes your boots. The wind hums through the trees. Children run ahead, laughing wildly. Adults stand in groups, gazing at the land and whispering plans for homes, farms, futures that no longer feel like distant fantasies. You step into a clearing, a small, open space where the sun touches the earth directly. The air is warm, clean, fragrant. You set your hand on the wagon, feeling its familiar worn wood beneath your palm. This is where the journey ends. And another begins. You take one more breath, slow and steady, letting the valley fill your lungs, your chest, your whole being. You have arrived. And now, we slow everything down. The sun sinks gently behind the hills, its last light draping the valley in soft gold and fading peach. The air cools slightly, settling into a warm, steady quiet that feels like a blanket laid over the land. You stand here at the edge of your new beginning, letting the peaceful rhythm of this place seep into you. Every sound grows softer, more distant, more comforting. The rustle of leaves, the slow breaths of resting oxen, the quiet murmur of your fellow travelers finding calm. Even your heartbeat seems to settle into an easier rhythm, slow, steady, unhurried. Your body, so tired from the miles behind you, begins to soften. Muscles loosen, shoulders drop. The long ache in your legs unravels thread by thread. The air drifts warm against your skin, carrying scents of earth and pine, and the faint sweetness of distant water. Each breath feels deeper, smoother, as if the valley itself is breathing with you. The last light fades, shadows lengthen, the world dims into a soft, peaceful blue. You settle into that quiet, letting it hold you, letting it reassure you, letting it whisper that the hardest parts are over now. You've walked so far, you've endured so much, and now, finally, you can rest. The stars begin to appear, gently, one by one, like sleepy lanterns being lit across the sky. Their soft glow wraps the valley in a serene hush. And somewhere in that silence, you can almost hear the land welcoming you, calm, steady, safe. You lie back, letting the earth support you, letting the night cradle you, letting the long journey fade gently into stillness. Rest now. Breathe slowly. Let sleep take you. You're home. End of script. Sweet dreams.